awesome.
Awesome.
That was awesome.
You guys are awesome.
No,
You're awesome.
No,
You are awesome.
Sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome. I'm your host, Kev, and this is the show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. And for this week's guest, it's complete deja vu. That's right. If you heard me on Twitter, I probably started complaining about this old application that we used to record. And last week's episode is kind of I made it like a best of. You've probably listened to it if you're listening to this episode. It's like a best of, but never heard before, so I don't know what you would exactly call it. But you've heard the clip of this week's guest somewhere in that episode because there's about 15 to 30 minutes of audio that I was able to save from that original interview. So you heard part of that, and we're not going to bury the lead too much because that intro is intact of this week's guest. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. For you guys, really the first time, but for Joe, the second time. Oh, I just said your name. I just gave it away. Cosmo Joe.
Hey, what's happening, Kev?
Oh my God. Well, not only am I completely stressed because of what happened, I interviewed before you, I think 2 other people and then a guy after you. And then I listened to all the interviews and discovered that they were all ruined. So I had to go to all 4 of you and say, hey guys, can you do the show again? And here's what's great, that, you know, this harkens back to, and we may get into it in a little bit, depending on where this conversation goes. Right. But you and I talked about podcasting and talked about the community. And I think we extended that beyond the podcasting community to like all like the indie community, where everyone is kind of just like there for one another. And not one person was like, oh my God, I have to do this again. I wasted an hour of my life, in your case, 2 hours of your life, to have the show ruined, and like 15 minutes of that conversation is usable. You all were really cool about it. I can't thank all of you enough, especially you, because you were here. I think we did a 2 to 2.5 hour interview.
Right. I think it was at least 2 hours, man.
Yeah. So thank you once again for being on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. And hey, you know, I mean, I gotta say it. I mean, having the opportunity to talk about this stuff is great. And you know, I can't remember who I was telling after the interview, but I was telling a friend of mine, and I just said it was so much fun and so reaffirming to be able to talk about these kind of things and to have an outlet to talk about them. I wish that there could be more opportunities to do that. And see, somebody was listening, and yeah. So here I am. We get the chance to talk about it again.
Exactly. And I'll tell you what, it is, I enjoy getting, it's weird. I've been doing this for 10 years. And I feel like I've never been closer to the podcasting community as I have been before. And I don't know if that's just experience, if that's I mean, you're in it for 10 years. Eventually you're going to be closer than you were the year before. But it's like the idea that people are coming to me to say, yeah, I'll do your show, or I want to do your show, or, you know, people are saying, hey, you know, we're having a podcast meetup. Why don't you come to that? And just finding out all about the whole, I think this is just the time for podcasting, and where like there's so many podcast conventions that go on now.
I was going to say, man,
cool.
I'm not sure what was, how much of the last interview was heard, but I know we spoke last time about the fact that, you know, when you first had me on, 10 years ago, podcasting was still in its infancy. It was something that I had heard about, but not really got into. And then skip ahead, I had to literally, I'm not even making this up, I had to literally update my iPhone to a 64 gigabyte versus the 12 gigabyte or whatever it is, because I have so many unplayed podcast episodes. But you're right, man. The community there's definitely a community now where I never felt like before there was really a podcasting community. But with things like New Media Expo, with some podcasts like we mentioned last time we spoke, like Serial and WTF, the Mark Maron podcast. I mean, there's so many podcasts now that are really legitimizing the genre. And
Yeah.
So it's been really cool to kind of go from where you introduced me to this to where podcasting is now.
It is kind of nice to, at least for me, I know I've been here kind of since the ground floor. There were a couple shows out there before me, like Kevin Smith did some podcasts before me. I'm sure I don't know if Mark Maron was on the circuit in '06. But there were a handful of guys out there 10 years ago. And we started just after that. So it's kind of cool to be on the ground floor of it and see how this medium has progressed in 10 years and how it's been accepted by the general public. I mean, Serial helped with that. Barack Obama being on Mark Maron's podcast, like we talked about last time, certainly helped that.
Right.
The fact that I was watching a movie where the main characters were podcasters is just it blows my mind. The fact that Scream, the television show, utilizes that instead of a normal reporter, they use a podcaster who's much in the vein of what's her name, Sarah Kane. I can't pronounce her last name. It's slipping my tongue. This the host of Serial, but she's very much that character.
Sarah Koenig. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were going for, but yes, all right, Sarah Koenig. And so that's who that Scream, the TV show person is it's taking over that, like, hey, I'm doing a Serial type podcast. So to see that in pop culture now is just really cool, and it warms my heart that I can say I've been around since the ground floor. Right. Yeah. And, and I mentioned last time we spoke, and I'm not sure if it was in the, what was saved, but, last year was the first year that I kind of jumped into podcasting myself and, did a bluegrass music podcast, and, it was scary, but fun. It was one of those things, I just thought, okay, I have microphones, I have recording software. How hard can this really be? But, it was born out of necessity. I think having become such a kind of a podcast junkie, a couple of years ago, I really started getting into, bluegrass music, which is, I think, country music's form of, indie music. It's, bluegrass music, the style of it kind of predates what I think currently know as country music. But it is so grassroots and so, independently driven. The top artists in bluegrass music are, basically funding their own projects and funding their own marketing campaigns for their music and that kind of thing. So it's amazing. So the music that's coming out of that genre of music is awesome. So, as I started getting more and more into it, I kind of, was looking through the podcast stratosphere to find, a good long form interview podcast about bluegrass music or interviewing bluegrass musicians. And there was really none out there. There were a few, that, kind of stereotyped bluegrass music with the, the yeehaw kind of things. Just like, man, it's such a, I was a classical musician, and I was just blown away just how much skill and technique it takes to play, that genre of music. So, in any case, long story short, I just thought, well, if there's not one already out there, I'm going to do one myself. And, kind of not a cocky attitude, but, I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, like, I can do this. How hard can it be? But it didn't take me long, man. Podcasting is a full-time gig.
It is.
Scheduling interviews, calling publicists, recording the interviews, re-recording interviews when your software crashes.
I'll tell you what, I got a chance to sit down and listen to your podcast. I listened to your episode 0 and episode 1.
Oh man,
and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. It was cool. listening to you be the host, because I've only ever known you as a guest on a podcast. So it was cool seeing you on the other side of the table, or hearing you on the other side of the table, I should say.
Man, I was scared to death. I think I recently, or actually, I think during the run of that podcast, I kind of like went back and listened to 0 and 01.
I'll tell you what, because I think we discussed on the last time we sat down to record how your that first interview you did on episode 1 was with someone that you like admired and respected.
Yeah,
and you were nervous. Yeah. I didn't hear it. And maybe that's because I'm a poor interviewer when it comes to people like of that status, someone that's above me, that I don't really know. So like I feel that I'm not good at it. So I listened to you and I was like, oh, that's great. Like I don't know what he was talking about. I thought you did a great job. I liked I really enjoyed the format, and it was cool. As someone who is not necessarily a music person, but especially not that type of music, and I'm just going to classify it as country, like that country music, whether it's country or you go down into that really specific subgenre of bluegrass, like that's just not my thing typically. Right. But I enjoyed being able to listen to somebody talk about their passion. So that's where I think every podcast can be an audience for anyone. You don't have to appreciate bluegrass music. You don't have to be a fan of it to necessarily listen to that podcast and like not enjoy it. Like you can enjoy it just by soaking in. I don't know. I like to soak in information, I guess.
Thanks, man. Yeah. And that's, and I'm the same way. I mean, I'll listen to, podcasts or about any subject, but I think that was kind of my mission statement or goal with my podcast was that, I admit several times throughout the run of the podcast that, I was one of the people that kind of stereotyped bluegrass and thought it was, whatever, hillbilly music or, having had the chance to kind of, meet a lot of the players and the people and the artists, I wanted to, at the very least, let people know that it's more than just what they saw on the Beverly Hillbillies, and, or what they saw in, what's that? Deliverance,
Oh yeah. That's my experience with bluegrass.
It's everybody's experience with it, man. It's like, just like, yeah, I kind of know from Deliverance and like the Beverly Hillbillies. So I was like, oh man, I got some work to do.
And it was great because it did, listening to, and I don't remember your first guest's name, but listening to her talk about bluegrass and music in general, really, and just kind of how she kind of came up. It just reminds me of my stories and how I came up in podcasting or even wrestling back in the day. Like it's just everyone, no matter what you're doing, you kind of have the same basic story of you feel like you're surrounded by a strong community.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I felt that way in podcasting. Like as I was doing podcasting, as a matter of fact, podcasting and bluegrass music was a perfect marriage because it was, like we were saying, podcasting is still in its infancy, but it's developing this community. It's very independently driven. Everybody that's doing podcasts, I mean, everybody's friends. There's not a real sense of competition. Like even if you're doing the same type of show, people are kind of like, yeah, hey man, I'll come on your show and you can come on mine. Yeah. And it's great. And bluegrass musicians are the same way, man. I mean, like, you can pick up 17 different bluegrass albums and you'll see the same players kind of like just, guest playing on that one and guest, singing on that one. And, it's a strong community of players. And the girl I interviewed on that episode 001 her name's Kelsey Harrigal and the band's name was Flat Lonesome. They're all kind of 20 somethings and, I thought it was a perfect way to kick off that podcast because they all had that kind of like young energy. It was definitely bluegrass music for the non-bluegrass fan, but she was very, gracious, to me, coming on the show and, I'll give you my secret of why I didn't sound as nervous as I'm telling you what I was. I re-recorded all of the.
Oh,
all
that's
of
right.
my
That's
questions.
right. You did tell me that.
Yeah. Oh my God. I was a stuttering mess. Like when I went back, I was just like, there's no way to edit this to make myself sound, halfway decent. So I just reinserted myself asking the questions in a much, so Kelsey.
And that's what a smart podcaster editor does. Is obviously a lot of people go into a podcast looking for the quality. Like it used to be, you could get away with things not sounding as good because it was just older technology.
Right.
But that's what a smart podcaster does. Unlike me, who I just record, and unless there's an edit that I feel like needs to be made, I just let it all go. My stutters, everything. I'm not a. We used to be back in the day when you first, and for anyone that didn't listen to last week's episode, Joe and I go back about 10 years almost at this point. We did a show. I did a show called Happy Hour Steel Tip, and Joe was the manager, guitar player for the Shannon Cole band,
Right.
and they were a guest on one of our episodes, and like it just. I don't want to say, I want to say, I mean, that show was so short lived that it was probably almost all the bands we interviewed, but there's really, I can only think of two that formed like a decade long friendship at this point where, with you, at least with you, I don't really talk to Shannon much anymore. And I still talk to the guys from Robots and Race Cars every now and then. So like, it's just, and there you go. That's another, like, we keep going back to like the community and how strong it is in the podcasting world. Like you can make lifelong friends from your guests or from other podcasters. It's so cool.
Right. And that, and that's something that I experienced too with my podcast. It was just, getting the chance to interview and meet all these artists and managers and that kind of thing, kind of like, brought me a little bit closer to all of them and like you said, built some friendships. So I was kind of like building my podcast community, but at the same time I was kind of entering the bluegrass community, and I had a couple chances afterward to play with some of the people that I interviewed, and or they invited me out to the show. So it was great. I mean, it was just a great marriage. I mean, I had to stop doing the podcast or it's kind of in hiatus right now because like I said, it's so much work. I was, I need to do another episode just to tell people what's happening. But, I'm thinking like I should probably have a co-host and somebody else scheduling the interviews, and you definitely need a team. And,
it is a hard, medium to get into, especially when you're at that indie level, because it is, I won't call it a full-time job for me, but it really does demand a lot. And like,
right.
I was lucky enough up until last weekend, to be ahead by a month. Like I was scheduled till mid-May with interviews, and that makes it so much easier when you're that far ahead to say, all right, I can do one interview a week, maybe two on a certain week, depending on people's schedules, just to like have a backlog of shows.
Right.
When you get in this predicament where like I have a show, I'm redoing the whole schedule of the show because of this. We're now releasing on Wednesdays instead of Mondays. And to give me the extra 2 days to put together a best of show, to give me a week to put together this show and get more interviews under my belt to just get that backlog back, because I'm a fan of the idea of these long form interview shows that are in the same vein as like Fat Man on Batman with Kevin Smith, Guy on Girl with Aisha Tyler.
Right. Right.
Where it's not like you guys aren't coming here to really promote something necessarily. You're just here to talk. And so there's no timetable for that, Exactly.
And that's, I couldn't agree with you more. That's exactly what I was looking for. When I was saying that I was looking for that bluegrass podcast, was those long form interviews where they're not necessarily promoting one thing and over talking that one thing, but really getting a history of the guest and finding out a lot more about them than you would be able to find out otherwise, because there's no time limits, and there's no there's nothing interrupting the flow of the conversation. Like, hey, we'll be right back, and when we return, and we have to fit it into 24 minutes because of the commercial. It's just that's what I think I meant earlier by the independent spirit of podcasting, is that it allows you to I guess dive in deeper or more deeply than you would in any other commercial medium anyway.
It lets you do whatever kind of show you want to do, because
Exactly.
there is a place for that style of podcast where you do have commercial breaks, and you do almost. I mean, that's what Happy Hour with Steel Tip was. We were basically running off the schedule of I forget who the afternoon host here in Philly at YSP, when they were Talk FM or Free FM or whatever. Matt and Mike or something like that. They were basically a 2-hour show on YSP, and that they had like specific segments that they did, and that's what we did back in the day. And there was a lot more editing to it and stuff that I wasn't really part of. But like for the first 5 years of my podcasting career, that's what I did. I did basically regular radio talk shows in podcast forms, and there's absolutely the audience out there for it, and I still have an appreciation for that. But I kind of like the more specific topic type of shows now, where you're not that this has a specific topic. The specific topic is you, the guest.
Right.
So that's where I'm at now with my preference.
Yeah, I love it. And if there's any of your audiences listening as prospective podcasters, and I'm sure you can probably speak to this more than I can, but I think one of the things that set me up for this long-term hiatus was that I kind of went in with the weekly model of the show. Like, I was going to release a show every Monday, or like what you just said with your show every Wednesday. That's one of the things that just right off the bat made me discover, like, wow, that's really, Monday comes really quick.
Yes.
When you're doing, it's unbelievable. You feel like I had this whole week to get all this stuff together. Even when you have a backlog of interviews, like you just said, man, you burn through them all of a sudden, and you're just like, oh wait, I don't have anything for this week. And, so, I mean, it might be a good idea for prospective podcasters to just kind of give yourself a little more time, kind of start, a monthly podcast or bi-weekly or something like that.
You know what? And there's this other show that's a long form interview show that I connected through on the Philadelphia Podcasting Society Facebook page. We've chatted back and forth. We're trying to schedule something to be on each other's shows, but he's more music centric than this show is. Right. And he does every other week. He does, twice a month. And that's, the best thing about podcasting is anyone can do it. It's such an easy medium to get into. In today's world, you can literally use your iPhone or Android device to record a podcast, and hell, you can even edit it within your phone now. Right. I don't have much experience in doing that, but you can do it. Like, that's the thing. And you can probably even get it uploaded to iTunes from that point, because you can have your WordPress blog built into your phone now. So there's such an easy way to do it now. But at the same time, if you're going to do podcasting, and I'm 10 years into it, still poor at doing this, but you need to have a consistent schedule. Like, if you want to build your fan base, you need to, if you're going to release every Monday, you need to release on every Monday. So I have an issue with saying, oh, I'm going to release every Monday, and then Tuesday or Wednesday I end up releasing the episode, even though I had a backlog for it. Right. So it's like you said, Monday creeps up fast from the rest of the week.
Yeah, I mean, I think, even though there's that independent nature of podcasting, I think audiences are audiences, and consistency, knowing, hey, it's Monday, and knowing when to, the most successful podcasts out there are ones that, Monday and Thursday they drop, or, they're, it gives you something to look forward to and plan your schedule around, actually, if,
At that same token, though, I would also say, if you're going to get into podcasting, like, get into it for you. Like, I think everyone should do a podcast, because everyone has a story. And I could just repeat what Kevin Smith says on pretty much a weekly basis on one of his podcasts that he does. But you know, everyone has a story, and I think everyone should do one. But if you're gonna do one, you don't necessarily do it for you before you do it for an audience. So, you know, find that schedule, find what works for you, find what equipment works best for you. If you can do it on your phone, great. I mean, I've just gotten into like a storytelling podcast. I think it's Radio of Free Planet X or something. And I can't discern what the exact story is about quite yet, because I kind of hopped in chapter 1 of part 6 or something. Like, it's, so I'm not quite sure where the story is. It's kind of sounds like it's like a post like a Mad Max type world.
Oh, okay.
But story podcasts are like so cool now. Like, you can do anything.
Yeah,
you know, if you're a writer.
I'm trying to think of the name of that other podcast that was real popular it was about a year or two ago. It was
Welcome to Night Vale.
Night Vale. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you. I'm glad that's all I gave you was just that other podcast. Out of the millions of podcasts out there, you were able to kind of read my mind and grab that one.
That one, I only listened to a handful of episodes. I should give it another chance because now that I'm more into that kind of concept, I think I'd be more open to it.
Yeah, you know what, man? I'm with you. Like, I listened to about the first 3 episodes, and you know, kind of what you were saying about bluegrass music. I wasn't necessarily into the type of story that they were telling, but what I was blown away by was the fact that this is basically an audiobook.
Yes.
I mean, any writer, any novelist, any you know, body that's dreaming of being a published writer and having an audiobook, you can just, like you said, if you have an iPhone and an app that records your voice, you know, there's an app I think called Boss Jock that you can actually like mix music in, but even just the notes thing on your phone. I mean, you know, you can create an episode of you reading a chapter of your book and make your own audiobook for, you know, not just the price of hosting it on a website or WordPress or something like that. But so it you know, again, I don't want to, you know, put too fine of a point on this independent thing, but it really is just something that opens up a world of more possibilities for independent artists, no matter whether it's music or you know, writing, journalists, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, it just gives them a, you know, a format and an outlet that, you know, was never here or never available before.
And now's the time to do it, because you know, at some point, it may not be in my lifetime or your lifetime, at some point someone's going to find a way to make it so that podcasting has rules and regulations that you have to follow, just like everything else.
Yes.
So now's the time to get into it, because at some point you may not have a chance to get into it.
Yeah. And you know, and actually they tried. I mean, what was that lawsuit a couple years ago? Was it Joe Rogan that was involved in basically, long story short, I mean, people tried to trademark. They called them like trademark trolls, where you know, they trademarked something that was already in existence and nobody trademarked before. Like, you know, these guys trademarked the ability to I don't know, post audio, you know, pre-recorded audio in a podcast format, and they were trying to basically shake down podcasters to say like, hey, you owe us a licensing fee, and you know. But you know, I want to say it was Joe Rogan. I'm probably totally wrong here, but in any case, one of the podcasters like fought back and raised a lot of money to fight back hard, and he eventually won, and you know, the whole thing was thrown out. But that was scary, and I think a lot of podcasters were rightfully very scared of this, because this would have taken away you know, the very soul and the nature of what podcasting is, and you know, and would have like kind of like limited it only to those with, you know, a lot of money behind them, or, you know, that kind of thing.
And that's what I like about the world we're living in right now, is that it's not just, you know, we've been talking about podcasting for like the last 20 plus minutes now, but no, that it extends to writing with the ease of self-publishing now. It extends to, well, I won't I can't speak for music necessarily, but I'm going to assume that it's easier to get your music out there now as an independent artist than it was 10 years ago.
Oh yeah.
It extends to, writers or filmmakers that want to get something out there on YouTube. Anything out there now that you can do creatively, you can do in this whole new media world that we live in.
Right.
And for the most part, you can find an audience. You can do it on a much less expensive budget than you could if you went mainstream.
Right.
And you get to do what you want to do is like the most important thing. You're not being told what to do.
Exactly.
Hey, we're taking a quick break so we can talk to you about our new podcast, Looking for RPG. It's hosted by Mike, co-founder of That's Entertainment and a founder of Tellest. Speaking of Tellest, this is a tabletop RPG podcast game that takes place in that very world. Mike has woven a great story for you to listen to while we play this game. It is so much fun. Check it out on thatentertains.com. It drops on April 30th, 2016, and it's going to be a monthly podcast. So check it out right here on thatentertains.com.
And that's, I know we mentioned this the last time we talked, but that's, that was always my main background was music. And I guess I've been in the artist development and management part of the music industry for, I guess, probably the last half of my career. I mean, the first half of it was definitely spent more on myself, writing and trying to, find publishers for my work and starting bands and recording music and, trying to, I don't know, become famous in the next, I don't know, Def Leppard. I don't know what I was into, but yeah, none of the, I mean, it was exponentially more difficult to find an audience, to get anybody to hear your music. I mean, the term garage band, I think, was created because of that. I mean, most bands didn't get past their garage, and, their audience was literally their next door neighbors or the cops or, and then, around the time when we first met, I guess that was probably around 2005, I want to say, somewhere around there.
I think 2006.
2006.
It was like,
okay.
I want to say summer, early fall.
Right. I mean, I know, Facebook was still, if it was even in existence, it was just relegated to anybody with a .edu email address.
Yeah, it may have just moved on from that too. But we were heavy in MySpace in those days. Right.
I was going to say Shannon Cole's, big, I guess social platform was MySpace. Yeah. I think the wounds in the music industry were still pretty fresh from the whole Napster near-death experience, and they felt like they dodged that bullet. But then came iTunes and and YouTube. I remember actually right around the time of working with Shannon, the first person came up to me and said, "Man, hey, you got to check out this new website called YouTube. You can put up videos for free." And, it was just so, I don't know, it was so new at the time, but.
Well, I mean, 2006, that's the year that new media basically was defined, at least as new media, because before that, there were videos online, there was audio online, but none of it had a name. None of it had a YouTube, or none of it had a podcast or anything like that. It was
kind of underground and yeah. Right, because the music industry in general spent so much time and so much money trying to squash it, with the Napster thing, and I mean that was a big turning point in the music industry anyway, and I mean it took a few years for them to kind of like regroup and figure out. When I say they, I mean just basically I think the independent music movement or the new media movement at large, where and we're just started coming, like you said, 2006. Everything was just starting to be born, and then just skip ahead, man, just one decade, and look at it. I mean, it's insane how fast and how hard the entire music industry was turned on its ear because and there's no way to control it now. I mean, there's and the real pioneers in the music industry now are the ones that are finding a way to embrace it and kind of make a profit off it that way. Rather than trying to hunt down every person on YouTube who's infringing a copyright, somebody figured out a way to monetize it. Allow it to happen. You're not going to be able to police it, you know, and shut it all down. So, okay, how do we make money from this? And they found a way. You know, they allow you to keep those things up on YouTube, and they just put an ad on it, and the ad revenue goes to the copyright holders. And
There is, and that, I mean, going a little away from the music side of it, there's the YouTube stars. Like that's a term.
Yeah.
These and they're recognized as legitimate, and they should be as legitimate, like famous people.
Right.
They have book deals. They do speaking dealies, and they some of them even, you know, migrate. Like the Angry Orange started on YouTube. I think that's on Cartoon Network, Adult Swim now or something. And then, you know, there was that Freddy show that went to Nickelodeon, and eventually a couple movies. Like it's a place where you can literally as an independent artist, and no matter what that means to you, make a career, have a career, and makes good money doing it just through ads.
Yeah, I was going to say through ads and you know, right. I mean, in YouTube, if you're an artist on YouTube, you turn on the monetizing feature, and basically what happens is, you know, you get a percentage yourself of whatever YouTube makes off of people watching your video. They'll put an ad in the front of it and that kind of thing. But there's artists that come down here now looking for a deal that are building popularity on YouTube, and no record label can offer them a deal as good as what they're making on their own just through YouTube. There's no way. It's like, you know, how can you go from making 100% of, you know, the ad revenue that's due to you through YouTube to making 8% of it, you know, when you sign to a record label and they take, you know, 82% or 92% of your earnings. So it's, you know, it's giving so much more power to artists to call their own shots and like you said, make their own music without having to make it fit into, you know, some kind of a formula that works.
And part of that success is, and we talked about this last week, is that this new media age that we're in, it gives the most direct line of communication with your fan base that you can have. And that's the difference for some people. If you're good at interacting with your audience, and whether it be through Q&As on your YouTube page or just engaging them on Twitter or comments or whatever, like that's what drives you to have, like, to get a bigger audience, to get a bigger, percentage of, or get more revenue from the YouTube ads or whatever. Like that before the new media, you could interact with your audience in a controlled environment. Now it's, you know, everything's on the table.
Right. And, you know, it's, and by no means, I think, you know, where a lot of artists, and I just experienced this over the past couple of weeks, because I had a couple of consultations with new artists that are looking to, you know, improve their social media presences and, you know, find a marketing plan for their music and that kind of thing. But I think what a lot of the misconception a lot of people have about new media is that it makes things easier. You know, like, it's so much easier now to get your music out there, and it's, you know, so much easier now to reach your fans. It's not. There are more opportunities for it, but it makes it a lot more difficult just merely by virtue of the fact that there's so much of it now. Now everybody with a guitar is a YouTube artist, or you know, or has a Facebook page with 20,000 hits on it. And, you know, it's just, there's so much more noise that people have to sort through now. And you have to be that much more creative in finding a way to rise above it all, you know, and stand out, you know, among literally millions of other artists that are all doing the same thing.
And I also look at it because that's the same thing. Like, you know, just a couple minutes ago, we were saying, oh, podcasting is easy. Anyone can do it with whatever. Yes, it's absolutely easy to get into, but we also, and the same goes for whether you're a musician or you're, you know, a director, writer, whatever, in this new media world, it is, I would say, yes, it's absolutely easy to get into it. However, it is then you're literally doing everything. You are your own manager usually. You are your own producer in the case of the podcasting, where you are booking your own guests, you are editing your own shows, you are producing your own shows, you are hosting your own shows, you're promoting your own shows. So you have to, and we discussed this before, you have to wear every single hat, which is a great learning experience, absolutely, but it's a full-time job when it's something that you're just starting out doing.
Right. And you're absolutely right. And it's great that this new media puts, more, I guess, business responsibility or more power in the hands of artists. But now you have to be as much of a business person as you are an artist. And, historically, artists are really horrible business people. And I'm including myself in that bunch. I mean, it's still learning how to, like I was just saying earlier, come up with marketing plans and business plans and that kind of thing. And I would so much rather be just focusing on things creatively. And that's, I think, every artist. And when they get that overwhelming sense of like, wow, I'm going to be spending more time promoting my songs than actually writing my songs. Yeah. It's very discouraging. And, and to your point earlier, the example I was just giving to an artist yesterday was, I can literally have you, I'm not even exaggerating this time frame. If I, record a song in my house in the afternoon, I can have it up on iTunes, iTunes. I'm getting my new media mix up here. Yes. YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon. By that night, literally within hours, I can have it up there, ready to go, ready to sell. So, it's that easy to get it up there, and I can record it probably on the iPhone and get it up there. but right, then you're one of however many tracks. I think they crossed the billion threshold on iTunes now, haven't they? Wow. or maybe a billion downloads or whatever it was. But so okay, you're one little star in the Milky Way here. How do you drive an audience to it, and how do you get people to start downloading it now? So that's the hard part. Yeah. All the rest is pretty easy.
Yeah, it drives me mad, or it used to drive me mad, thinking about how I'm going to market the show and how it was nice. Here's the nice thing when you're doing a podcast with a group of people like I did back in the day, is that we all kind of shared that responsibility. Like I literally back in the day took the and it wasn't the right thing to do, but I took the egotistical host road. I was like, I'm going to show up. You're going to tell me what I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to bring the funny. And, and I did a little bit of prep. But other than that, like Jonesy did a lot of the promoting. I think Jay was more along the lines as me. Like we were like, hey, we're the host. We're not going to do anything but show up and talk. Right. Jonesy and Santora really ran that show. Happy Hour.
I think I've met you, or I think we were first contacted by Santoro, man. If you can get to that point, it's great. I would, for the artists that I develop, the music artists that I develop, it would be fantastic for them to worry about nothing else than just writing and performing. And, and fantastic in the sense that it will free them up to be more creative and to focus more on, do one thing and do it well. But, and I think that's just, I hate saying the words, this day and age, but, in this day and age, yes. I think just that the ability to reach that point is just a lot more difficult and a lot more rare.
Yeah. But you know what, that being said, no one be discouraged. Go chase that dream, because you know what, you find whatever you're good at, whatever you like to do, I should say, like find a way to make money off that, because that's how you're going to be happy. And right. It's as hard as it can be, because you have to stand out. It also, you can, if you love it that much, it can be at least fun to do. It can at least be a fun, difficult road versus what many of us do in their day job and just be a shitty, difficult road throughout the entire day until you get to your night. I literally don't like. I haven't been to bed in over 24 hours because I was up writing last night. So like, that's where I work my day job, but it's not what I want to do. I want to do this. I want to be creative, whether that means podcasting, filming, or writing or whatever.
Yeah.
So like, you have to be willing to sacrifice all that.
Right.
All your sleep basically to get what you want.
You know what, man? I mean, I went through a long period in my career where, I was a professional musician, and that, I mean, it was all I did. It was my full-time job. And I'm not saying that I didn't like it. It was great waking up every morning and knowing I was going to go make music or be creative, in some way. But I almost kind of prefer now. I'm in the same position as you. Within the past year, I've had to, kind of get a day gig. But I kind of went into it kicking and screaming, but fast forward a year, I love the position it puts me in creatively, because now, I mean, honestly, everything that I do creatively outside of my day job is stuff that I want to be doing.
Yeah.
And I have the power to say no to that, or no, I'm not, I don't think I can. There's not much I can offer you, or I don't want to be working on that project. Because, when you do it full time, when it is your profession, then I do photography as well. And, if it's your full-time gig, you're doing a lot of baby pictures and bar mitzvahs and I don't know, things that you didn't necessarily see yourself doing in the beginning, but you have to pay the bills and you have to keep the lights on. Musically, the same thing. You're playing for a lot of bands or shows that it's just like, oh man, how did I get this gig? I don't know, playing in a bar, I don't know, after hours to 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. But so I don't know. I mean, I think being an amateur. I mean, and I think amateur. The word amateur has kind of become almost like has a stigma to it. I mean, it literally means for the love of it.
Yes.
So if you're an amateur podcaster or an amateur musician or an amateur, it doesn't mean that you're not talented. I mean, as a matter of fact, most of the amateur musicians I know are far more talented than the professional ones. It just literally means that you do it for the love of it rather than to pay the bills.
Well, and we talked about this last time, I know mainstream music just because it's kind of out there in the world and whatnot, but my love of music is in the, I call it indie, in the indie world, but amateur world. It's the robots and race cars. It's the Shannon Cole bands. It's the Danger Clubs. It's the, there's whatever bands in Philly. Like, there's not one band in Philly except for maybe metal, like hardcore scream metal bands, that those I can do without them. They're talented. That's not my thing.
Right, not your scene.
Yeah, but like, there's pop, punk, even in country. Like, I will dig usually indie country for whatever reason. Maybe it's because it's not the same old thing you're hearing out in the mainstream.
Exactly.
But I mean, we used to be on Happy Hour Steel Tip, later Creepcast and Happy Hour, and the Stabcast when I was a host there. Like, we were like just indie promoters, and that's something that I don't necessarily promote as much as I used to, but like, absolutely, like, anything indie, I will, especially like music, especially is what I gravitate to in the indie world. And it's just so much more, I don't want to say more talented, but it sounds better. It looks better because it is for the love of it versus for, I have to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I was saying that's where the real, I think we talked about this last time I was on, but it's the experimentation that's allowed to happen. There's more of a freedom for artists to, like I was saying, not have to fit their music into a 3.5 minute upbeat song that doesn't deal with things that are too emotional, or I mean, there's nothing wrong with commercial music. I don't want to come off as sounding curmudgeon-y about commercial music.
I love Bon Jovi, and I'm going to name a lot of like 80s and 90s that, like, I love.
I'm with you.
I love my music that's commercial music.
Yeah.
But if I have a CD, like one of the greatest benefits of doing shows like the Stabcast and Happy Hour was that like indie bands sent us their music, and that was great. Like having just a pile of CDs, like you were working a college radio station or whatever,
right.
just of music, new music that you never heard before. Like there's nothing like that, just something new and fresh versus the other stuff that's still good in its own right.
Right. A conversation that I either walk into or become a part of somehow very often down here is, hearing a lot of other musicians or people that are like my age, like you mentioned the 80s and 90s bands, but like, you'll hear people say like, man, where are the Bruce Springsteens of today? And where are the Queen, bands like the Queen, like bands like Queen and Hendrix, where are they, man? I'm just like, dude, they're out there. They're just indie bands now. I mean, they're not mainstream, but they're still out there. And it's amazing when you come across them. I was talking to a friend of mine on Friday, and we were talking about vocalists who are just incredible. There's a blues singer named Beth Hart. And I was introduced to her through, anybody that's really into, hardcore, I don't even know if I can call her blues. I mean, she's kind of like a cross between Janis Joplin and, God, I don't know, Muddy Waters and I don't know. It's just, but she has this power to her voice, and she's really popular. I mean, every time she comes through this city, she'll sell out 3 nights in a row. I mean, everybody, who's really into that type of music knows her. I don't think not a single song has ever played on radio. A guitarist named Joe Bonamassa, who I'm really into too. It's the same exact thing. I mean, he doesn't have anything on radio, but his recordings and his music and his guitar playing is just phenomenal and experimental, and it's just amazing to listen to. But they've I don't know if it's because of new media or whatever, but that's where the experimentation and the I don't know, the different stuff is happening.
Well, a perfect example is Robots and Race Cars. The album that they released before whatever they did Kickstarter on, I can't recall the name of it off the top of my head. Well, it was a good album, but it was them trying to be mainstream. It wasn't bad. I liked it. Robots and Race Cars for the longest time were my favorite band, just in general. And I really liked that CD. But then when they went to Kickstarter and did their Rage Quit CD, they were in a position to do the music they wanted to do on a CD instead of trying to go mainstream. And it's by far their best album, and every song is amazing on it, to the point where I bought the rights to one for one of the podcasts.
Oh, that's great.
It's when you are not trying to be mainstream or trying to play to that crowd. We've said it pretty much for the last 10, 15 minutes. Like, it's just, you're more creative. You're more willing to take a challenge or a risk to experiment and put something new out there.
Yeah, just kind of let the creativity flow more freely, and with and that's when I think the most creative things happen, is when there's not as many restraints and shackles and that's just allowed to happen, and things are just allowed to happen.
I mean, you look at the big thing out there now is like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is all good. I love it all, but I'm a comic book nerd. So, but you look at some of those movies, and it's like, if anyone who didn't see Deadpool, but you go and see Deadpool, and like it nails everything about the comic book movie genre, where it's pretty much, this is going to be your comic book movie. You're going to hit A, B, and C to get to the end of your movie. There's very few movies, especially in the Marvel brands, that like are really kind of different. Like, it may be different, but at the end of the day, it's the same kind of story. Usually, like your Captain America's Winter Soldier is one of the few exceptions. The original Iron Man is an exception, where they're like just really unique. The Netflix shows are really unique and not the same kind of I don't want to say cookie cutter Marvel stuff, but cookie cutter Marvel stuff.
Right.
So when you have something like that, that's just so mainstream, like they have a formula, and
Right.
A plus B equals C, and that's what they're going to do to make billions of dollars.
Exactly. And man, that's I gotta say too that that's something else that I no pun intended, but I marvel at is is the comic books to me when I was a kid. I mean, that was an underground thing. When you went to a comic book store, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but it was almost kind of, they were always like seedy places. I don't know.
Oh,
Like they were
yes.
like on the top floor of a building and you had to go up a
Yes.
little old tiny staircase to get to them. And, it was kind of like this little cult of people that like you could talk to about them. But the fact that like now, there's graphic novels that are on like the New York Times bestseller list. The movie that was getting a lot of critical acclaim last year. It was an autobiographical. Oh God, I'm going to forget. Diary of a Teenage Girl. I think that was a graphic novel.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I might be thinking of the wrong thing, but I'm pretty sure like because even in the movie there was some kind of like animated elements to it to kind of give that look and feel of a graphic novel. So like, but like that's another thing that I think just I can't believe how that a genre that started out as such kind of like a subculture is such a part of the mainstream now.
Well, and things I've talked about with other guests that are now lost to that they're just a moment in time for me and that guest, but I'll bring it up now so that y'all can hear it. That the commercial before Force Awakens came out, where you have this nerdy guy literally building an R2-D2 unit, and then he remote controls it to a girl's house to ask her out to go see the movie Force Awakens with him, and she says yes. Like, all this stuff is stuff that didn't happen 10 15 years ago, however long I've been out of high school for. Like, when I was in high school, like, you would be punched in the face for doing something like that.
I know it, man. I know.
Like, that didn't happen. And the fact that like like for me, like, this is a world that like I love living in, because now we're on the same playing field, the geeks and the nerds, as the jocks. Like, and it's people. I think it was my guest Jason Ashley. So I don't know if it will be in the what could have been episode last week, but he put it perfectly that like he knows a guy who refuses to go see Star Wars, the new Star Wars, because it's nerdy and whatnot, and like it's not cool. But like, he's the minority now. Like, when you're that guy that like you're hating it to hate it, or whatever your reasoning is,
Right.
like
Right.
now you're the nerd. Like, you're not the nerd in the true sense, but like
Kind of like the social outcast.
yeah, you're the social outcast guy. Like, everyone and their mother went to go see that movie, and you're holding out because you think it's nerdy.
Right. I was shocked at how many people went to see it who never saw the original two trilogy. Like that just like, well, and people that were asking me, like, so if I never saw any Star Wars before, because I really want to go see this one, well, like, I guess, get somebody to fill you in, I guess. but yeah, it really kind of sparked this, well, plus it's like, I think that JJ, the fact that it was directed by JJ Abrams kind of, he's almost kind of like a pop culture icon now, and with laws. I mean, like, I think with the original trilogies, I mean, George Lucas, I mean, he didn't he do, was it, oh God, what was it was like the 1950s movie that he did.
American Graffiti.
American Graffiti, right? Like, but I think for the most part, like, he was kind of like an unknown, and this music or this movie about outer space and So but I think like J.J. Abrams, like, everybody kind of knows him from Lost and all the other things, and
he, I think he did a great job with this movie. I really enjoyed it.
I agree.
When I knew I liked Star Wars before I saw any kind of trailer for this movie, and I'm probably on record as saying this numerous times already, but we'll say it again. I knew I was a fan, but like, I thought I was just like, yeah, I like Star Wars. I've it Star Wars was a great movie. The prequel trilogy was the prequel trilogy. I fell asleep during most of the movies, whatever. Like, I don't hate them, but I didn't like them.
Right.
But like, and I had very fond memories of watching the original trilogy as a child with my uncle. Like, my uncle kind of brought me into that universe. But like, I would never say I'm a Star Wars super fan until I saw the first Force Awakens trailer. And, you know, the first half of it or whatever is like the new guys and whatnot. I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is gonna be this looks like a Star Wars movie. And then boom, the John Williams score hits.
Yeah.
And boom, the Millennium Falcon.
The Millennium Falcon, yeah.
I'm talking about it. I'm getting goosebumps right now. And I've seen the movie. I own the movie now.
Yeah.
But talking about that moment, I'm getting goosebumps. I got goosebumps during it. The second trailer, when you see Han Solo and Chewie for the first time in 30 years or whatever, and they say, Chewie, we're home. Like, it almost brought a tear to my eye. Like, it was. Yeah. In the trailer, I'm talking about just the trailer. So like, I found out that I was a super fan.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think you don't realize how deeply, you know, a movie like that affects you. And even, I guess, because like you said, your memories of it were as a child. And I mean, you know, I saw Star Wars, and you know, the first one was about 77, I think.
Like that.
Yeah. You know, in the theater, and it just you know, God, it was magic. You know, and besides that, there was also there was definitely a formula that worked. And I mean, God, I remember sitting in college classes debating or talking about the philosophy and the storytelling of Star Wars, and how it, you know, was modeled after, you know, the Greek tragedies and you know, but there's I mean, I think there was actually literally college classes devoted to the philosophy of Star Wars.
Sure.
But but I don't know. I think it was just great storytelling that happened to be, you know, against the backdrop of, you know, this outer space and this technical thing. Whereas, you know, I'm with you. I kind of tend to be the guy that kind of sort of defends the second trilogy. Like, you know, I feel like some of it's like, well, some of it's misunderstood. And, you know, as a Star Wars fan, I enjoyed them still. Yes, they were very disappointing because all three were just, I think, just Lucas playing with all this new technology.
The first one I can't defend anymore. So I bought the 6 movie set after I had gone to the theater and saw the new movie.
Okay.
And I said to myself, there's this order called the Machete order where you watch these Star Wars films. And the idea is like someone who's never seen Star Wars before, so like my kids, you show it to them in this Machete order, and it's spoiler free, basically, meaning you watch episodes 4 and 5, because if you watch 1, 2, or 3 first, you know who Anakin turns into. So you watch 4 and 5, Darth Vader. You find out in 5, Darth Vader, spoilers, Luke's father.
Right.
If you don't know that spoiler, where have you been? And then you go back to episodes 2 and 3. You can just throw 1 away. Supposedly, and I have never watched episode 1 all the way through. I've seen it now 2 or 3 times and have fallen asleep each time. Wow. But supposedly anything that happens in episode 1 that is important to the story of Star Wars is repeated in episode 2. So you can go right to episode 2. You can watch episode 3.
I never thought of that, man. That's I got to try it. I think I'm going to do it.
And then, so episode 2 and 3 is basically just a giant flashback to Darth Vader as Anakin Skywalker. And then episode 3 and episode 6 has Luke has parallels with Anakin, where he's dresses in black and he kind of dances on that line of light and dark. And it's kind of, it supposedly enhances those 2 prequel movies by watching it in this order.
Okay.
But I have yet to officially do it because I want to watch 1. I want to get all the way through it. But I just, like, I put it in, and my son and I started watching it, and we both fell asleep.
Yeah. I mean, the saving grace of that movie to me is Liam Neeson.
Yes.
I mean, you know, and Ewan McGregor. I mean, like, you know, the fight scene, the lightsaber fight scenes, and you know, that kind of thing. I mean, their acting. I mean, in all honesty, I think the saving grace of that entire second trilogy is Ewan McGregor. You know, and his Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, I can't think.
I didn't have complaints about him.
Yeah, that, and I'm brain farting on her name.
Natalie Portman.
Natalie Portman, yeah. I mean, they're acting. I mean, even Portman gets a little bit hokey in some parts, but I think her acting in episode 3 and just throughout that series. I mean, those two had to bring so much more to the table, and literally carried that entire trilogy on their shoulders. That, and of course, when you see Samuel L. Start. Although I do have to say, man, and I know I'm not alone in saying this, so this is not a unique point of view by any means, but I was one of the guys who went to the midnight showing of episode 2, and there was no tease whatsoever about the Dooku Yoda thing, and man, I think one of the greatest moments in my entire life and history of going to movies was when, he pulled back that robe and took out his lightsaber. I mean, like literally the theater was on its feet.
Oh yeah, I remember that moment.
There was just like a rumble, like what? It's Yoda. Oh my God. And then like when he starts, flipping out, I mean, like literally the I've never been in a movie theater where just like the entire place is just standing and cheering. It was a great moment, and it was of course after that they were showing it in like, hey, if you haven't seen but so I don't know, there was its moments throughout that trilogy
and that trilogy is I mean, I guess you could say all the Star Wars movies are for kids, but those one especially those movies didn't feel like Star Wars movies to me. There was something lacking, and it could very well be your Han Solos, your Chewbacca. Well, I guess Chewbacca was in it for a little bit,
right?
But your Han Solo, your Luke Skywalker, the Millennium Falcon, like you were just missing what it wasn't Star Wars. Force Awakens, I don't care how similar it is to A New Hope. Like, it is a Star Wars movie.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
And who cares? Like, that's what it should be. We're introducing ourselves to a new generation of the Skywalker Solo clan. And like, who cares if it parallels episode 4? Like, episode 3 and 6 have parallels with one another. Like, I think it was great. It was definitely one. It's probably my second favorite Star Wars movie.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I really do. And
okay, we're gonna cut it right there. Big thanks to Joe Caliva for coming on the show again. As we had mentioned earlier, he was on the show a couple weeks ago for 2 hours. We sat down and recorded, and most of that interview was lost. So he was gracious enough to come back and re-record the interview. So big thanks to him. Next time we're going to meet with him is next week, 1 week from today. We're going to finish our conversation where we get into more of him, more about Joe and music and where he learned and how he found a love of music and what it means to him. And it's a great story. Can't wait for you guys to listen to the last half of this show with Joe. And just huge thanks. I can't thank him enough for coming back on the show. Follow him on all his social media accounts at Joe Caliva on Twitter. Search Joe Caliva on Facebook. Check out his website, joecaliva.com. I'm not gonna leave you with much more. We kept you a little longer this week, probably an extra 10 minutes here now. So check us out on Twitter at That Entertains. Find me on Twitter at HHWST. If you got some time, it would mean a lot if you could go to iTunes and subscribe to the podcast. And while you're there, if you wouldn't mind leaving a quick review and a 5-star rating, or, whatever you think we deserve. I'd like to think that we're pretty honest on this show and we're pretty upfront. And that alone has got me worth a couple stars. And we're bringing you some great guests here. iTunes has some sort of algorithm that does something to get us on the front page. So the more reviews and the more ratings we have, the higher ratings we have, the better for our show. So if you could take 5 minutes of your day and just do that for us, that would be great. I would really appreciate it. For Everything is Awesome, I'm Kev, and you've been listening to us right here only on awesomepodcast.com.